On June 16, 2016, Joe Cox, the British Labour Party Member of Parliament for Batley and Spen, died after being shot and stabbed multiple times in Birstall, West Yorkshire. In September, a 52-year-old local man named Thomas Alexander Mair was found guilty of her murder and other offences connected to the killing, and was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order. Mair had singled out Cox, a passionate defender of the European Union and immigration, because he viewed her as one of the collaborators, a traitor to white people. The incident was the first killing of a sitting British MP since the death of Conservative MP Ian Gow, who was assassinated by the Provisional Irish Republican Army in 1990, and the first death of a politician during an attack since County Councillor Andrew Pennington was killed in 2000. Attack. Joe Cox was elected to represent the parliamentary constituency Batley and Spen at the 2015 general election, having spent several years working for the international humanitarian charity Oxfam. She was married with 2 young children. On June 16, 2016, Cox was on her way to meet constituents at a routine surgery in Birstall, West Yorkshire, when Thomas Mair shot her with a sawn-off rifle, and stabbed her twice, outside a library in Market Street. She died at the scene. Retired mines rescuer Bernard Carter Kenny, 77, was stabbed after coming to Cox's aid. He was later awarded the George Medal for his bravery. Another witness followed Mair and identified him to police. Perpetrator. Thomas Alexander Mair, a 52-year-old unemployed gardener born in Scotland, had a long history of mental health problems. He believed liberals, leftists, and the mainstream media were the cause of the world's problems. He targeted Cox, a passionate defender of the European Union and immigration, because he saw her as one of the collaborators, a traitor to white people. Mair had links to right-wing political groups including the National Front and the English Defence League. He had attended far-right gatherings and purchased far-right publications, to some of which he had sent letters. In his home were found Nazi regalia, far-right books, and information on the construction of bombs. He had searched the internet for information about the British National Party, apartheid, the Ku Klux Klan, prominent Jewish people, matricide, white supremacism, Nazism, Waffen-SS, Israel, public shootings, serial killers, William Hague, Ian Gow, another assassinated MP, and Norwegian far-right terrorist Anders Behring Breivik, about whose case he collected newspaper clippings. A police official described Mair as a loner in the truest sense of the word, who never held down a job, never had a girlfriend, never any friends. The Guardian referred to him as an extremely low burner who appears to have fantasized about killing a collaborator for more than 17 years, drawing inspiration from David Copeland. The evening before killing Cox, Mair visited a treatment center in Birstall seeking help for depression. He was told to return the next day for an appointment. However, Mair's health was not part of the defense case in the trial. After his arrest, he was examined by a psychiatrist who found no evidence that Mair's mental health was so impaired that he could not be held responsible for his conduct. Trial, conviction, and sentence. On June 18, 2016, asked to confirm his name in Westminster Magistrates' Court, Mair said, "My name is death to traitors, freedom for Britain." His lawyers said there was no indication of how he would plead. Mair was remanded in custody and the magistrate suggested he was seen by a psychiatrist. At a bail hearing on June 20, the judge remanded Mair in custody until a hearing to be held under terrorism-related protocols. At the next hearing on June 23, the judge said the case would be handled as part of the terrorism case management list, on which cases related to terrorism as defined by the Terrorism Act 2000 are placed. At a September 2016 hearing, Mair's counsel said they would not advance a diminished responsibility argument. At another hearing the following month, Mair again appearing by video link refused to enter a plea. The judge entered not guilty pleas on his behalf. Mair's trial began at the Old Bailey on November 14, 2016. He made no attempt to defend himself. Witnesses testified that during the attack, Mair had cried out, "This is for Britain, keep Britain independent, and put Britain first." On November 23, 2016, the jury took about 90 minutes to convict Mair of Cox's murder, grievous bodily harm against Bernard Carter Kenny, possession of a firearm with intent, and possession of a dagger. The same day, Mair was sentenced to life imprisonment. The judge said he had no doubt Mair murdered Cox to advance a political, racial, and ideological cause, that of violent white supremacism and exclusive nationalism most associated with Nazism and its modern forms. This made the case exceptionally serious. Accordingly, the judge imposed a whole life term, meaning Mair was not eligible for parole. Reactions. Cox's funeral was held in her constituency on July 15 and thousands of people paid their respects as the cortege passed. To the murder. United Kingdom. Cox's husband Brendan issued a statement on June 16, the day of her death, which said, "Today is the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. More difficult, more painful, less joyful, less full of love. I and Joe's friends and family are going to work every moment of our lives to love and nurture our kids and to fight against the hate that killed Joe. Joe believed in a better world and she fought for it every day of her life with an energy, and a zest for life that would exhaust most people. She would have wanted two things above all else to happen now: one, that our precious children are bathed in love, and two, that we all unite to fight against the hatred that killed her. Hate doesn't have a creed, race, or religion, it is poisonous. Joe would have no regrets about her life, she lived every day of it to the full." The statement was described by Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn as one of the most moving statements I've ever heard from somebody so recently bereaved. In a later interview, broadcast by the BBC on June 21, Brendan Cox said of his wife, "She was a politician and she had very strong political views, and I believe she was killed because of those views. I think she died because of them, and she would want to stand up for those in death as much as she did in life." Following the death, Union flags on British public buildings, including the Palace of Westminster, Buckingham Palace, and 10 Downing Street, were flown at half-mast. It was announced that the Queen would write a private letter of condolence to Cox's widower. The counting of votes in the Tooting by-election held on the day Cox died was halted for a 2-minute silence. Corbyn stated, "The whole of the Labour Party and Labour family, and indeed the whole country, will be in shock at the horrific murder of Jo Cox today and paid tribute to a wonderful woman." A vigil attended by senior Labour Party politicians, including Corbyn, was held in Parliament Square. First Minister of Scotland Nicola Sturgeon described the news as utterly shocking and tragic news, which has left everyone stunned. Chief Minister of Gibraltar Fabian Picardo stated, "This is a truly appalling attack on a serving MP working hard to serve her community. This horrific act is an attack on democracy and the British freedoms that Jo Cox worked so diligently and passionately to defend." Rosina Allen-Khan, who won the Tooting by-election for Labour, used her victory speech to pay tribute to Cox, saying, "Jo's death reminds us that our democracy is precious but fragile. We must never forget to cherish it." One day after the attack, Corbyn and Prime Minister David Cameron visited Birstall, where they joined locals to lay floral tributes to Cox. Cameron said, "The most profound thing that has happened is that 2 children have lost their mother, a loving husband has lost a loving wife, and Parliament has lost one of its most passionate and brilliant campaigners, someone who epitomised the fact that politics is about serving others." Veteran Labour politician Neil Kinnock, whose wife Glenys had supported Cox's candidacy and whose son Stephen shared an office with her, described the family's grief in a BBC television interview. Writing for the Financial Times, Sarah Brown, who worked with Cox on a campaign to reduce the number of deaths in pregnancy and childbirth, said, "Jo's life testified to her view that tolerance is not enough. We must tackle the causes of prejudice and discrimination, teach ourselves how to treat others equally and do far more to help those most in need." Cox was remembered at church services held on Sunday, June 19, including one held at St. Peter's Church, Birstall, where Reverend Paul Knight described her as a fervent advocate for the poor and the oppressed. On June 17, Friends of Cox established a fund in her memory. Proceeds were to be split between three non-profit groups: anti-extremist group Hope Not Hate, Royal Voluntary Service that Benefit the Elderly, and the Syrian volunteer search and rescue group White Helmets. The fund raised over £500,000 in one day, and £1 million had been raised by June 20. Significant donations to the Jo Cox Fund included an award of £375,000 that was raised from fines resulting from the Libor banking scandal. Proceeds from a cover version of the 1979 Bette Midler song The Rose, recorded and released by Batley Community Choir, will also benefit the fund. Friends organized more in common celebrating the life of Jo Cox, a public event in her remembrance that was scheduled to take place in Trafalgar Square, London, on June 22, the date of her 42nd birthday. The event saw Cox's family transported on a memorial boat laden with floral tributes along the River Thames to Westminster, where crowds listened to speakers including Brendan Cox, Malala Yousafzai, Bono, Bill Nighy, and Gillian Anderson. Similar events took place around the world, including Batley and Spen, Auckland, Paris, Washington, D.C., and Buenos Aires. On June 20, Oxfam announced it would release Stand as One live at Glastonbury 2016, an album of live performances from the 2016 Glastonbury Festival, in memory of Cox. Proceeds from the album, released on July 11, went towards helping the charity's work with refugees. Musicians and festival-goers at Glastonbury, held later that week, also paid tribute to Cox. At one concert, Billy Bragg led the audience in a rendition of We Shall Overcome and was joined on stage by women wearing suffragette ribbons. Parliament was recalled on Monday, June 20 to allow MPs to pay tribute to Cox. In a break from convention, under which MPs sit grouped together by party, MPs considered whether to sit together on a non-party basis for the memorial sitting, a suggestion made by Conservative MP Jason McCartney. Only a few MPs chose to do so, however. Following the sitting of Parliament, MPs and others attended a memorial service at nearby St. Margaret's Church. On June 20 a petition was created calling for Bernard Carter Kenny, who had intervened in the attack, to be awarded the George Cross. He was awarded the George Medal in the 2017 birthday honours. Carter Kenny died of cancer on August 14, 2017. In July 2016, organizers of the annual Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival, an event in Dorset celebrating the efforts of a group of agricultural workers to form a trade union, dedicated that year's event to Cox's memory. In August, cyclists took part in the Jo Cox Way, a 5-day, 260-mile cycle ride from West Yorkshire to Westminster to raise money for charities Cox supported. The event raised £1,500. At its 2016 party conference held in Liverpool in September, Labour launched the Jo Cox Women in Leadership programme, a mentoring scheme facilitated by the Labour Women's Network and designed to help women into leadership roles. In November 2016, MPs and musicians collaborated on a version of the Rolling Stones song You Can't Always Get What You Want for release as a charity single in Cox's memory and to raise funds for the launch of the Jo Cox Foundation. Artists who took part in the recording include Ricky Wilson of Kaiser Chiefs, Steve Harley, KT Tunstall, and David Gray. Sir Mick Jagger and Keith Richards subsequently announced they would be waiving their royalties from sales of the single. BBC Two aired the documentary Jo Cox, Death of an MP on June 13, 2017 to coincide with the first anniversary of her murder. Also in June 2017, to mark the first anniversary of Cox's death, her family and friends promoted a weekend of events titled The Great Get Together. Events included picnics, street parties and concerts. The Great Get Together was also supported by former British Prime Ministers John Major, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and David Cameron, all of whom recorded a joint video paying tribute to Cox and urging people to celebrate her life. The video was aired as part of Channel 4's late-night talk show The Last Leg on the eve of the first anniversary of her death. On June 24, 2017, a coat of arms designed by Cox's children was unveiled by them at the House of Commons, where MPs killed in office are remembered by heraldic shields. Rock group U2 paid tribute to Cox during the UK leg of their 2017 Joshua Tree tour. Lead vocalist Bono, who had worked with her on the Make Poverty History campaign, dedicated the song Ultraviolet, Light My Way, to her memory. International. Senior politicians around the world paid tribute to Cox and expressed shock at her death. United States President Barack Obama telephoned Cox's husband to offer condolences on behalf of the American people, and invited the family to meet him at the White House. The meeting took place in September after Brendan Cox attended a refugee summit in New York. Former U.S. Representative Gabrielle Giffords of Arizona, who was seriously injured in a shooting in 2011, stated she was absolutely sickened to hear of the assassination of Jo Cox. She was young, courageous, and hard-working. A rising star, mother, and wife. Several European leaders expressed their shock at the news, among them German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who described the attack as terrible and called for a moderation of language to counter radicalization and to foster respect. Overseas politicians who knew Cox personally included New Zealand Labour MP Phil Twyford, who said, "Jo will be sorely missed by her family, her friends, UK politics, and the international labour movement." In the Canadian House of Commons, NDP MP Nathan Cullen, who had known Cox for several years, described her in an emotional tribute as a dedicated Labour MP and a long advocate of human rights in Britain and around the world. Numerous other tributes were paid to Cox, including those by public figures in Australia, Canada, Czech Republic, Finland, France, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Netherlands, New Zealand, the PLO, Spain, Sweden, and the United States. In July 2016, the Italian Parliament established the Cox Committee, a cross-party committee on intolerance, xenophobia, racism, and hate crime, naming it in honor of Cox. In August, her nomination of the Syrian Civil Defense for the 2016 Nobel Peace Prize was accepted by the Nobel Committee. Earlier that year, Cox had written to the committee praising the work of the civilian voluntary emergency rescue organization known as the White Helmets, and nominating them for the prize. The nomination gained the support of 20 of her fellow MPs and about 12 high-profile personalities including George Clooney, Daniel Craig, Chris Martin, and Michael Palin. The nomination was also supported by members of Canada's New Democratic Party, who urged Stéphane Dion, the country's foreign affairs minister, to give his backing on behalf of Canada. A street, formerly Rue Pierre-Étienne Flandin after Pierre-Étienne Flandin, in Avallon, a town in the Yonne department of France, was renamed Rue Jo Cox in May 2017. To the conviction of Mair. In a statement to the BBC following the conviction of Mair, Cox's widower Brendan said he felt only pity for Mair and expressed hope that Jo's death will have meaning in persuading people that we hold more in common than that which divides us. In the Times, David Aronovich asked why some people, all of them pro-Brexit as it happens, were so keen to dismiss the first, and accurate, reports of Mair's words, claiming such people resisted because deep down they feared that aspects of the language or direction of the Brexit campaign they legitimately supported had emboldened extremism. While they themselves were in no way permissive of the act, might they in some way have been permissive of the motive? Or even of the mood? In his article, Aronovich cited official Home Office figures showing a rise in race hate crime. Aronovich's words were criticized by Peter Hitchens in the Mail on Sunday, who wrote, "Let no leftist propagandist try to smear me as an apologist for her killer. But I am repelled and disturbed by the attempt to pretend that this deranged, muttering creep was in any way encouraged or licensed to kill a defenseless, brave young mother, by the campaign to leave the European Union." Only 2 British newspapers did not feature a picture of Cox on their front pages as her murderer was arrested. The Financial Times focused on the first autumn statement from the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, and the Daily Mail. The Mail was criticised for its focus on Mair's mental health and thoughts of matricide instead of his extremist political motivations. Owen Jones tweeted, "The coverage of Michael Adeboah, one of Lee Rigby's killers, did not focus on his history of mental illness. It focused on his ideology." In its print edition, the Mail placed its coverage of Mair's conviction on page 30, which prompted LBC radio presenter James O'Brien to accuse the paper of double standards, saying the Mail has chosen to put the murder by a neo-Nazi of a serving British MP on page 30. "I don't really understand why. Unless a murder by a neo-Nazi is less offensive to the sensibilities of the editor of this newspaper than a murder by a radical Islamist." The focus the Mail gave to the conspiracy theory that Mair may have murdered MP Joe Cox because he feared losing his home of 40 years to an immigrant family led to the paper being accused by Jane Matronson in The Guardian of normalising anti-immigrant prejudice, which she saw as a factor in Cox's murder. Wider context. Cox's death was the first killing of a sitting British MP since Eastbourne MP Ian Gow was killed by the Provisional Irish Republican Army in 1990, and the first serious assault since Stephen Timms was stabbed by Roshanara Chowdhury in an attempted assassination in 2010. Another example of an attack on an MP while carrying out constituency duties was the attack on Nigel Jones in 2000, resulting in the death of his assistant, local councillor Andrew Pennington. Many MPs went ahead with planned constituency surgeries scheduled on the day after Cox's death with increased security. A spokeswoman for the National Police Chiefs Council said police forces had been asked to remind MPs to be vigilant about their personal safety. It said, "Officers will offer further guidance and advice where an MP requests it on a case-by-case basis depending on any specific threat or risk." The party whip's offices urged MPs to discuss security measures with their local police forces. In July 2016, Kevin McKeever, a Labour politician and partner in Portland Communications, a public relations firm accused of playing an instrumental role in an attempt to force the resignation of Jeremy Corbyn, received an alleged death threat telling him he should prepare to be coxed. Commenting on the incident, and others' threats, MPs had received threats, Ruth Price, Cox's parliamentary assistant, urged people to move away from the baseless, nasty, and intimidating abuse MPs currently face. Joe Cox's murder was also explicitly referenced in the social media posts of a man who was jailed for 4 months in April 2017 for making death threats towards the then MP for Eastbourne Caroline Ansell of the Conservative Party. 2 months after the death of Joe Cox, at least 25 MPs received identical death threats, including the Labour MP Chris Bryant. Bryant said the threats were particularly disturbing. That a lot of these threats are to women. I think women MPs, gay MPs, ethnic minority MPs get the brunt of it. At the time of Cox's death, MPs wishing to make additional security arrangements were required to apply to the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority, IPSA, the watchdog overseeing their expenses. On July 20, the House of Commons Estimates Committee voted to strip IPSA of this responsibility amid concerns over the time frame of the process. MPs were offered training sessions in Krav Maga, a form of unarmed combat that combines judo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, and street fighting. The Yorkshire Post reported that the first session, held in early August, was attended by 2 MPs and 18 assistants. Cox's murder took place a week before the 2016 European Union membership referendum. The rival official campaigns suspended their activities as a mark of respect. David Cameron cancelled a rally in Gibraltar supporting British EU membership. Campaigning resumed on Sunday, June 19. Polling officials in the Yorkshire and Humber region halted the counting of referendum ballots on the evening of June 23 to observe a minute's silence. The 2017 general election campaign was suspended for an hour on May 21, 2017, as politicians held a truce in memory of Cox ahead of the vote. Following Cox's murder, the Conservative Party, Liberal Democrats, UK Independence Party, UKIP, and the Green Party announced they would not contest the ensuing by-election in her constituency as a mark of respect. Brendan Cox also ruled out standing for the seat. Tracy Brabin was chosen as Labour's candidate on September 23, and elected to the seat on October 20. 9 other candidates contested the seat. They included 3 candidates who stated their intention to stand before the election was confirmed. On June 20, Jack Buckby, a former member of the British National Party, announced he would be a candidate in the by-election for Liberty GB. On July 18, the English Democrats announced that their deputy chair, Therese Hurst, would also stand. Although UKIP did not contest the seat, UKIP member Waqas Ali Khan announced on August 6 he would stand as an independent. In the days after Cox's death, Aaron Banks, founder of the Leave.eu campaign for Britain's withdrawal from the European Union, conducted private polling to determine whether the incident would affect the referendum's outcome. After disclosing the matter to LBC radio presenter Ian Dale, he was challenged as to whether such a poll was tasteless. Banks rejected the suggestion, saying, "We were hoping to see what the effect of the event was. That is an interesting point of view, whether it would shift public opinion. I don't see it as very controversial." Likewise, Gary Jones of the Mirror Press sunrised political editor Nigel Nelson to write a front-page Mirror story on the Jo effect, saying her death had swung support to Remain in a new opinion poll under the headline, "Tragic Jo's Death Sparks Poll Surge Despite Only 192 of the 2,046 answers Comres received were after the murder, and that Comres, the figures should be treated with a degree of caution given the sample size." At a speech to the London School of Economics in September 2016, Martin Schulz, the President of the European Parliament, said the nasty referendum debate was a contributing factor in Cox's death. The comments were swiftly criticised by some of Cox's colleagues, including leading Eurosceptic Conservative politician Jacob Rees-Mogg, who described them as trivialising her death. Cox's killing has been likened to that of Swedish politician Anna Lindh in 2003. Lindh was stabbed to death shortly before Sweden's referendum on joining the euro, which she supported. Campaigning was also suspended after her killing. Swedish newspaper Dagens Nyheter said, like Jo Cox, Anna Lindh was a young, successful politician, and both were the mothers of 2 children. Both were also participating in campaigns for the EU when they were murdered.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.